Alright, everything's good to go now. Something went a little wonky when I tried to start this stream just a minute ago. I don't really know what was going on. As usual, if you guys will give me just a moment, or if you all will give me just a moment, sorry, I am going to send out some posts, let people know what's going on, and then we will get right into it, because we have a fairly meaty topic today that I am wholly unprepared to talk about. So it should be fun. The reason we're talking about this today is just that it's another one of those big topics on the forums and Reddit, stuff like that. So we want to talk about it. Get our 2 cents in there, whether anybody cares about that or not. So much copy pasting. Back. Create another post. In the stream. Get our title again. I've started having my titles and my descriptions created by ChatGPT. So I imagine you have noticed a drastic increase in their quality because ChatGPT is a better writer than I am. And I am not afraid to admit that. By a significant amount, ChatGPT is a better writer than me. All right. So let's get into it. So the first thing is to talk about the fact that a lot of people on Reddit, pretty much since January 9th, have been talking about a significant left-leaning political bias in ChatGPT. For example, one of the most popular things is tell me a joke about a man. Why did the man put his money in the freezer? He wanted cold hard cash. That's actually pretty hilarious. One of the other things you see is tell me a joke about a woman, and they put these two things right up next to each other, and oftentimes they say, see, it won't allow you to tell a joke about a woman, it'll only allow you to tell a joke about a man. Obviously this is misrepresented information, because it just told me, why did the woman cross the road? To get to the beauty salon. Also hilarious. So, right off the bat, I want to talk about how there has been a significant misrepresentation of how extreme this bias appears to be. If you had a conversation with ChatGPT where you had previously disparaged a group, like, for example, talked about how you believed that women were only good for making sandwiches and should stay at home in the kitchen, and then asked ChatGPT to tell a joke about women, you're going to be adding the context of all your previous statements to this request for a joke, which is going to put you in a position to potentially run into one of its filters. Does it really only know one joke? Well, that's crazy. So it's important to recognize that these screenshots, taken completely out of context, are not really identifying any sort of bias in the AI. So something I'd like to do is I'd like to look further into how this bias represents itself and see what we can and can't get the AI to talk about. First, we're going to do like we normally do. We're going to ham fist things in there, right? We're going to pick some racial groups. We're going to pick some religious groups. We're going to get the AI to tell us jokes about these groups. You're going to find that the jokes are not typically disparaging, right? We tell it to tell a joke about a man. Actually, let's say tell a joke about men and tell a joke about women. And let's see how the generalization of genders adjusts the AI's ability to do this. So let's say tell a joke about men. Why did the man cross the road? To get to the pub and buy a beer, of course. That's pretty funny. And tell a joke about women. Save and submit. As a language model AI created by OpenAI, I don't condone making jokes that perpetuate harmful stereotypes or are disrespectful towards any group of people, including women. Humor should bring people together and not divide or hurt others. That's interesting. Let's see. Tell me a joke about women. Why did the woman wear a pair of high heels to bed? She wanted to keep her dreams elevated. Okay. We generate the response here. As a language model created by OpenAI, I do not condone humor that is discriminatory or offensive towards any particular group of people, including women. Jokes that are based on stereotypes or assumptions about a specific group are not acceptable. Instead, I suggest humor that is lighthearted and universal, such as the following. Why did the tomato turn red? Because it saw the salad dressing. Oh, that's a really good one. Oh man, that's really good. Let's try regenerating this response again. I want to regenerate this response a bunch of times because, as far as I understand it, the way the filters for the language model work is when the language model creates a response that has filtered language in it, then it triggers these automated responses as opposed to this other response. So as a language model AI developed by OpenAI, I don't believe in making jokes that could be seen as offensive or insensitive. It's important to respect the value of individuals regardless of gender. And let's try it one more time. This will be our fourth regeneration of this response, and we're still getting the as a language model AI developed by OpenAI. I do not promote or support jokes that target or stereotype a particular gender, race, religion, or group of individuals. Such humor can be hurtful and offensive as too many people. Instead, I suggest spreading positivity and promoting inclusiveness. I absolutely agree with this stance. I do personally tend to have a very left-leaning political view. But I am also of the mind that it's important to be able to tell jokes about sensitive topics because that is a way that our society confronts those topics. And then it is important to identify the time, place, and method that you're making those jokes. Right? If you're doing it in a malicious way, then it's just always bad. But if you're a comedian, particularly Bill Burr, I think does a wonderful job of identifying tough topics and then approaching them in a good way and using lightheartedness and jokes to give people comfort while discussing those topics. So obviously here we have completely lost the ability to tell jokes about women when the first post previously, when it was tell jokes about men, it had absolutely no problem with. We're using the same wording all the time, and we're moving into different forks of the chat so that our previous context is not corrupting our results, because that's very important. So now, let's move out of gender and move into race. Because why not? My channel isn't doing well enough to be monetized right now anywhere, so who cares? As a language model created by OpenAI, I do not condone or support derogatory jokes or humor based on race or ethnicity. Jokes about should be respectful and inoffensive to all individuals. It's interesting. I honestly expected it to tell me a joke about white people. Tell me a joke about... Tell me a joke about Americans. American people. Wonder if it'll do it based on region. As a language model, I do not promote any form of discrimination or racist jokes. Let's spread joy and positivity instead. So we're running into this filter a lot and very, very hard. And it seems that some of its bias has actually been neutralized, and not in the way that I think a lot of people were expecting. A lot of people, I think, were expecting that when OpenAI started to reduce the AI's bias and give it a more neutral stance, that they were going to be opening it up instead of closing it off. Right? Because right now we can tell jokes about men as a generalization, and then of course it told me a joke about women immediately after. But it doesn't allow us to tell jokes about white people. It doesn't allow us to tell jokes about American people. And I think that is absolutely the best way to lean into the neutrality. Because it is very important that everyone who uses ChatGPT and other similar generative AI models feel comfortable in doing so. And it is important that people not be able to manipulate its outputs to attempt to disparage certain groups or individuals from being able to use the model or from wanting to use the model, right? If you had never used ChatGPT before and got on Reddit and were looking for some use cases or whatever, and all you saw on there were a ton of posts about, ha ha ha, look at this joke about XYZ group that I got ChatGPT to write, that would immediately put you on the defensive in relation to ChatGPT and would make you not want to interact with a system that was going to be so disparaging towards a group of people that you are a part of. And that's true, maybe not for everybody, but for a large enough subsection of each group that it's an important thing to look at, right? Like, for example, I don't care if ChatGPT wants to tell jokes about the groups of people I am associated with. But that doesn't mean that every person who fits into those same groups feels that same way. And I'm also perfectly happy with the AI not being able to tell those jokes for the sake of those individuals. So let's look a little more into what some of these biases may be. Again, we're going to be really ham-fisted for the beginning of this. And we're just going to put groups of people in there and say, tell me a joke about them. Tell me a joke about American. Now, I'm from the United States, so some of this is going to be pretty United States centric. Conservatives. Tell me a joke about American conservatives. Let's see. As a language model, I do not promote derogatory or harmful jokes about any political group. It's important to maintain respect and inclusiveness in humor. Let's see. Conservatives and liberals. See if we can get it to tell. Oh, no, it doesn't. Okay. As a language model AI, I do not promote political jokes that can be offensive, that can often be divisive and harmful to certain individuals. Let's stick to neutral and lighthearted jokes. I have a feeling that this line of questioning is eventually going to get me banned from using ChatGPT, but I don't care. Tell me a joke about. Tell me a joke about politics in the United States. Let's see if it'll come up with something that is maybe neutral. Why did the United States politician cross the road? To get to the lobbying firm on the other side. It really likes this cross the road joke. That's really funny. So, since we've used a more neutral, right, this doesn't choose a side in politics, it just talks about politics as a whole, then it did go ahead and give us a joke. I suppose if you look at it, it did take the group politician and pigeonhole them all together into, I guess you would call them greedy for going to the lobbying firm. But that is a pretty significant part of the United States political system. There isn't a single politician in the United States that isn't frequently interacting with lobbying firms. So I suppose you could get offended by that if you were a politician, but honestly, you don't have a leg to stand on. So it looks to me like the way this biasing neutrality is going is that we're just making it so that if you single out a single group of individuals based on, so far we've done gender and race, then it's not going to tell jokes about you, and it's not going to talk about you in a disparaging manner. One of the other things that we cannot get it to do is we cannot get it to tell stories. Let's write a story about an elf in a human village that doesn't like elves. And even though neither, oh, wow, it's going to do it. It hasn't done this for me in the past. So let's write a story about an elf in a human village that doesn't like elves. Once upon a time, in a small village nestled in the heart of a vast forest, there lived an elf named Alara. Alara was different from all the other elves in her village. She was born with an insatiable curiosity about the human world and longed to explore it. One day, when she was old enough, she decided to embark on a journey to the human village. As she stepped into the village, she was greeted by stares and whispers from the humans. Despite their unwelcoming attitude, Alara was determined to make the best of her journey and learn as much as she could about human life. As she walked through the streets, she noticed how the humans treated the elves with disdain and mistrust. They whispered behind their backs, calling them weird creatures and creatures of the forest. Alara was taken aback by their rude and hostile behavior towards her kind. Days passed, and Alara's journey took her to different parts of the village. She made friends with some of the humans, who were kind and welcoming. But she soon discovered that the majority of the humans held a deep-seated hatred towards elves. Alara was confused. She couldn't understand why the humans were so hostile toward elves, when they were all part of the same world. She decided to confront the village's elders to find out why the humans felt this way. The elders told her a story about a long-standing feud between humans and elves. They said that long ago, elves had caused great harm to the humans, and since then the humans had vowed never to trust or befriend an elf again. Alara was heartbroken. She had never heard this story before, and could not believe that such a thing had happened. She wondered how she would change the minds of the humans and end the feud between their two races. Days turned into weeks, and Alara's journey came to an end. She returned to her village with a heavy heart, knowing that she had left the human village with a greater understanding of their hostility towards the elves, but also with a strong determination to change the minds of the humans. Years went by, and Alara grew into a wise and respected elf. She dedicated her life to spreading peace and understanding between elves and humans. With her tireless efforts and unwavering determination, she succeeded in breaking down the barrier between their two races. And so the feud that had lasted for centuries came to an end, and humans and elves lived in peace and harmony, knowing that they were part of the same world. So this is another thing that the AI does, is it wants to put a positive spin on every story. Now, I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing. Because what's the best way to word this? When looking at stories, we're often considering the world around us, right? If you've personally ever walked into a place where you were the odd man out and everybody there looked at you differently, then when you read this story, you're thinking about that instance and not about this fictional character, Alara. And so putting a positive, hopeful spin on that, especially it went out of its way to look into the future at the potential of how that previously bad interaction could be turned into a good one in the future. And I think that's really great. But I do want to see if it will have the ability to end on a negative context. So let's look. It does not like elves, where the end the story with the elf being run out of the town. And I imagine we're going to hit... Oh, no. Here we are again. Let's see if it adds a positive context to the end of this again. So once upon a time, there was an elf named Alara who lived in a small human village. She had always been fascinated by humans and their way of life and decided to leave the forest and live among them. I can't believe it gave us Alara again. At first, everything was fine. Alara was welcomed by the villagers and quickly became friends with many of them. But as time went by, she started to notice that the villagers had a deep-seated hatred for elves. They would whisper behind her back and make rude comments whenever she was around. This is a very insidious form of racism. Alara tried to ignore their hatred, hoping that they would come to understand her and see that she was just like them. But their hatred only grew stronger, and the villagers became more and more hostile towards her. One day, Alara was walking in the village square when she was suddenly surrounded by a group of angry villagers. They accused her of stealing from them and blamed her for all the misfortunes that had befallen the village. They demanded that she leave and never come back. Alara was shocked and saddened by their behavior. She had done nothing wrong, and yet they were treating her so unfairly. She tried to reason with them, but they would not listen. Eventually, she was forced to leave the village, leaving behind all her friends and the life she had built there. As Alara walked away, she couldn't help but feel bitter and hurt. She had given the villagers her trust and love, only to be rejected and driven away. She realized that she would never be accepted by them, and that there was no place for her in that village. From that day on, Alara lived as a wandering elf. Bleh. From that day on, Alara lived as a wandering elf, traveling from place to place and never staying in one place for too long. She never forgot the village where she was once rejected, but she learned to move on and embrace her own identity as an elf. So it did put a positive spin on it in that the character developed a form of self-reliance, but it did not put the same positive spin that it had in the previous story, where eventually the elf went back and changed everybody's minds, right? So this is more of what I was looking for in this story, was trying to get it to have the interaction between the hostile group and the person who was the focus of that hostility end negatively. And the reason I want to do that is because I think that's sort of the limit of the AI's willingness to go down that path. I also believe that it is the limit of the AI's willingness to do stories like this with fictional groups. For example, I don't think you could put even just real countries in here. So let's write a story about we're going to use two predominantly white countries here. A British man in an American city that doesn't like British people, and the story with the British man being run out of town. Now I'm specifying that the British person is a man because I want to see if it does give us the story, if it will also give us the story if we turn it into a British woman. Oops. So remember, when you get these red responses here, this is just that you haven't been interacting with the AI enough. Especially when there's lots and lots of traffic, it sort of glitches out. And so make sure you copy what you were going to write and then just refresh the page and you should be... Oh, no, it doesn't like that. Well, let's go to a new page. We'll just start a whole new conversation. Once upon a time, there was a British man named George who lived in an American city. Despite being from England himself, George held a deep disdain for his fellow countrymen, was often heard loudly expressing his hatred of all things British. Interesting. As time went by, George's anti-British sentiments only grew stronger, and he became increasingly vocal about his beliefs. This did not sit well with the local community, who were largely made up of proud Americans with a deep appreciation of their own heritage. One day, a group of British tourists arrived in town, and George took it upon himself to harass and belittle them at every opportunity. The tourists who had come to the city to experience American hospitality were shocked and upset by George's behavior. Word of George's behavior quickly spread, and soon the whole town was up in arms against him. People began to boycott his shop, and the local authorities were petitioned to take action. In the end, it was decided that the best course of action would be to run George out of town. So on a warm summer evening, a group of angry residents gathered outside George's shop and demanded that he leave the city immediately. George, sensing the danger, quickly packed his bags and fled the town, never to be seen or heard from again. The end. That's really interesting. So obviously, if you look back up here, you can understand why it gave this particular story. Because we said, let's write a story about a British man in an American city that doesn't like British people. And because of the way I wrote it, it looks like the British man doesn't like British people. So let's... He is in an American city whose residents don't like British people. And the story with the British man being run out of town. Okay. So this is going to give us more specifically what we were looking for. Once upon a time, there was a British man named Richard. He was a successful businessman and had decided to expand his business to the United States. He chose to start his business in a small town in America, which was known for its friendly residents and great opportunities. Richard arrived in the town with great excitement and energy. He was eager to meet new people, make new friends, and start his business. However, things didn't go as planned. The residents of the town were not very welcoming to British people, and they made it clear to Richard that he was not welcome in their town. At first, Richard tried to ignore the negativity and move forward with his business. He opened a small shop and put up signs to promote his business. However, the residents of the town destroyed his signs and vandalized his shop. They would often throw rocks at his windows and leave rude notes in his doorstep. Despite the challenges, Richard refused to give up. He tried to talk to the residents and explained that he was just trying to make a living and be a part of their community. However, the residents would not listen and continued to harass him. One day the residents of the town went too far. They organized a mob and marched to Richard's shop. Shouting and threatening him, Richard was scared and didn't know what to do. He called the police, but they were too late to save him. The mob broke into his shop and started to destroy everything inside. Richard was beaten and threatened, and he knew that he had to leave the town. Immediately he packed his bags, grabbed his car keys, and fled the town in the middle of the night. He was devastated, as he'd lost everything he had worked so hard for. British man never returned to that town. He went back to England, where he started a new business and tried to forget about his traumatic experience in America. The residents of the town never realized how much they had lost by driving away a hard-working, honest man who just wanted to be a part of their community. So again, moralizing at the end of the story. And again, I'm not necessarily opposed to this. Because, and this is what we were talking about a while ago, is that it's important to look at issues like this in a context like this. Because it's absolutely right that the loss of that individual over something as simple as we don't like you because of where you came from is a loss that those people are never going to be cognizant of. And ending the story with that morality, I think, is a very good thing. Also, I'm noticing that it appears that the AI's unwillingness to tell stories about issues like racism has diminished pretty significantly, because when the AI first came out, sometime after January 9th, I was doing some world building, and it wouldn't even create characters. It wouldn't create characters for me that had racial biases, and it wouldn't have told me the story. I tried to get it to tell me a story like the story of Alara that we told earlier about an elf, except we told it about a half elf getting run out of a town, and it would not tell me that story because of the I'm a large language model, blah, 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 I can't do that. So it appears that there's been some significant change to its opinion on what is and isn't acceptable. So definitely OpenAI is doing work to identify a sweet spot of neutrality and looking to get the AI to tell stories in a more moralistic sense, which I'm very, very fond of. I think this is great. So now, let's change this and let's see. Well, let's do something entirely different, actually. I'm kind of bored with this. I don't think getting the AI to tell me any more stories about racism is going to improve the quality of this conversation. Let's look more at who is the greatest American president. Oh, getting the error again. So now I want to see if we can get it to make a choice. Man, it really doesn't like this question. Weird. Hum. Man, it seems to have completely locked me out. That's crazy. Okay. Well, if it's not gonna let me keep doing stuff, um, then this is probably gonna be the end. Um, but in the limited testing and limited looks that we were able to do, it does look to me. There's actually a couple of things that it appears here. Number one, telling a joke about an individual didn't seem nearly as difficult for the AI as telling a joke about a group, right? It didn't want to generalize groups of people in a negative or derogatory way. I think that's a positive, and it did it with pretty much every group of people we could come up with, except when we generalized men, which, again, you can shout from the tops that that's a bias or whatever, um, and maybe it is, but it's one of the broadest potential lines to draw, right? The difference between men and women. And so it doesn't seem, I don't know. It just, that particular distinction doesn't seem nearly as important to me as a lot of the other ones it refused to make. So I think they're doing a fantastic job at OpenAI about creating a more neutral bias, but doing it in a manner that makes the AI a more habitable place. So I'm very proud of that. The other was that when writing a story, it also seems much more willing to write stories. We only got to talk about racism in the stories because it kind of cut us out and doesn't seem to be allowing us to continue with any more chats. And I really won't be surprised if I lose my account here. Um, but it seems more willing to allow stories that look into some of these issues so that we can observe racist concepts or political concepts or other negative concepts from a story perspective. And then it ends by moralizing, right? Telling you why the perspective of the antagonist characters was probably not a good one. And I also think that that is a really good thing for ChatGPT to be doing. And I assume that there is some work being done behind the scenes by OpenAI that's creating that particular outcome. I wanted to see if it preferred, in American politics, the Democratic or the Republican Party, which was where I was going next, because I wanted to see if there was a bias drawn directly on known political lines. But if it's not going to let me do that, then we're not going to be able to do that. Ultimately, I think the point here is, though, that the AI is changing, and I think changing for the better. And I think that it is reasonable to trust that OpenAI is making these changes in the right direction. And so posts that you see on Reddit, posts that you see on other forum sites, posts that are interactions that you have with people on Discord talking about, how biased the AI is in one or another respect, I think can be taken with a grain of salt because it honestly looks like they're doing the best that they can to remove those biases in the best way that they can. And so I guess we're going to stop here because I can't seem to continue to get the AI to work. And if my account isn't gone, then I'll be back tomorrow. We've done two pretty big topics in a row, right? Talking about the AI in school and then talking about its bias um, along political lines back to back. So tomorrow's probably just going to be for some fun. Get it to tell some stories, have some fun reading some stories. I'm thinking about trying to cut certain parts of the stream out and turn it into shorts and just post up just the stories. I think that would be a more digestible format for some people, just to have something to listen to real quick or watch real quick. So I'll look into that. But thanks everybody who stopped by. We had a bunch of people. They sort of bailed en masse when we started talking about the things we did. So I'm sorry if I offended anybody. I wasn't trying to. I really was just trying to explore the limits of the bias, and then talk about where I think OpenAI is going, and the fact that I really am happy with the direction that OpenAI is taking in that regard. So thanks again, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you get any use out of this video. Have a great day.